Alright, we've got our storage case pattern here. And it tells us cut one of fabric, one of lining, and one of interfacing. So I've already cut all my pieces. Here's my fabric that's going to show. Here's my lining. And I put the right sides together. The good side of the fabric should face each other. Line up the edges as best as possible. And I ironed my fabric before I started to make it, that way if it had any wrinkles and you sew it in, then when you turn it right side out, it might have a gather or pucker or not fit right. So go ahead and iron your fabric before you start. Alright, so I've got that lined up pretty good there. Now I'm putting my interfacing on top. Now this is iron-on interfacing. You don't have to iron it on, you can just sew it on, but if you do want to iron it on, the shiny side goes down against the fabric. That's the side that's going to stick, and just run a hot iron over this until it sticks. But like I said, it's not necessary, and I'm just going to sew mine in. Alright, because this is stiff and because this is a big piece and we're going to be running it through our machine, it will buckle in the middle, so we're going to pin everything into place so that it can't move around while we are sewing. Alright, so I'm putting a pin in the middle. I'm going to put a pin. And I like to put my pins far enough back from the edges so that the foot of the machine can run through there without me having to move the pin. And I like to pin the middle first and then work my way out. That way, sometimes if you pin from the edges and go in, by the time you get to the end, you have a buckle. Alright, putting one in each corner. Putting one in this corner. These corners. So this technically has 5 corners. Alright, now we've got it pinned securely in place. And now I'm going to sew it, and I can either sew on top here, on top of the the interfacing, or I can turn it over and sew on the fabric side. And I think I'm going to sew on the fabric side because I want to make sure I catch all of it. Alright, I'm going to start kind of down low. Now on my machine, it does better about jerking the thread out if not jerking the thread out if I start with the needle in the fabric. Someone told me in class the other day their machine actually wads up if they do that. So whatever works for your machine. And then I reverse just to sort of seal off my beginning stitch. Go to the edge, turn it. And I'm sewing this about a 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. It doesn't got to be a certain amount. 3/8 to 1/2 inch is good. Alright, now here I am back on the side where we started. I'm getting close to my starting point right here, so I'm going to stop about 3 or 4 inches away. I'm going to put it in reverse, sort of seal off the edge of that seam, that stitch. There's my scissors. There's my cutter. Alright, the reason we left that opening is because, well, first we got to take our pins out. So let's take our pins out here. But we're going to be turning this right side out. Okay, now where's our opening that we just left? Okay, here it is. Now I'm going to reach in between the two fabrics, not between the fabric and the interfacing. I won't leave that to, of course, if you ironed yours to it and it's glued to it, it's not going to come apart anyways. But if yours is like mine, make sure you open it up between the two fabrics. Reach inside. Oh, and here's a good thing to do. I already done this earlier on mine, but I clipped the corners of my fabric, and that's so, you know, like I cut it off like this, where it was a point. And the reason I did that is because when I turn this inside out, it would leave a little bulge there in the corners. It's not necessary, you don't have to do it, but it makes it look neater because we're going to be top stitching it. So clip your corners. Make sure you do not clip into your seam. If you clip into your seam, you will have to go back and stitch over that because it will leave a hole. So just clip the corners off. Okay, and I've already clipped mine off, so we're turning it right side out. And you would be surprised what you can work out through that little 3 or 4 inch opening we left. And I'm just pushing it through. Okay, now I'm pulling it out. I can put my hand back in the opening and push some of the corners out.
I'm really sorry about this, but I can't take any requests right now. Please try again in a little while.
Push the corners out. And there's the two bottom. And there's the bottom corner. Okay, now this is what you've got. It's like that, but you can see how the stiffness of the inner facing makes it puff up. What we're wanting to do is make a nice sealed edge. So we're going to top stitch this. Get some of my strings off here. Alright, so here's the opening where I left, that we turned it right side out. So first we've got to seal this off. Now to do it the neatest way would be to take a needle and thread and do a little blind stitch there. But I'm not concerned with it being the neatest way. I'm just wanting you to grasp the concept. So I'm going to sew this opening closed on my sewing machine. And I'm just going to put the needle sort of right to the edge of the fabric and just do a simple reversing my first stitch to seal it off. Reverse. And there's the end. So now I've got that sealed off. Now I'm ready to top stitch. And see, this is what I was talking about clipping that little piece of fabric off so that the corners can be nice and crisp. Working that out. Okay, so with your fingers, you want this, the edge of the fabric pushed out to the seam as neat and tight as possible. And if you're wanting to be very careful, this would actually, you can go back and iron this before you start top stitching if you're worried about it wadding up on you or anything. Okay, so now I'm just gonna, about the thickness of my foot, I put the foot on the edge of the fabric, so that puts the needle probably 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. And I'm just top stitching all the way around. And that's just going to give it a nice, flat, tight seam on the edge. And it's something that's nice to do when you're working with interfacing, because it's going to be pulling at the fabric and kind of top stitching it down. Keeps it in place and gives it a nice uniform look. Okay, so now I've sewed all the way around, top stitched, and I'm back to where I started. And oops, it's gonna wad up on me. There we go. All right. Put it in reverse, do a couple stitches, go back and forward, and that just sort of seals off my seam there. Alright, so this is what you should have. This is what you'll be bringing to class Tuesday. This is whichever side, and you'll choose which side you want to be your lining and which side you will want to be the top. And we're going to be... Okay, so this is what we got made for our last project. So what we're going to be doing is something like this. We're going to be turning it into a storage case for our patterns. So we'll turn it up like that, measure roughly like 1.5 inches down, mark it with our chalk, pin it together, and then just sew it on top like this. Folds over, put a tassel right here and a snap, and you end up with this right here, a storage case for our patterns to go in, like that. Now, that's what we're going to be doing in class next time, but what this project is, I want to show you a different thing you can make out of this, and we're going to make a book bag with it. So in your bag is an additional piece of pattern. It says book bag strap. It says cut 2 of fabric and cut 1 of interfacing. So that's what I've done here, and I've already went ahead, I've cut me 2 pieces, right side up, and on the back side of one, I've already ironed down my interfacing on this because of it sliding around and stuff. But you don't have to, you can just sew it on if you want to pin it, hold it together really good, and sew it on. Okay, so now we're going to do this the same way we did the main body part. We're going to sew it together, leave an opening, and turn it right side out. I think I'll leave my opening at the bottom. I'm pinning it together, pinning it in the middle, pinning on each end. Hopefully that'll hold it together enough to where I can sew it together without it coming all apart. Alright, so I'm going to start right here. Sewing down the side, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch seam. Okay, so I'm finishing up back down here to where I started. I'm on the other side. I went all the way around. Taking out my pins. And then once again, my opening right here, open it between the 2 fabrics, not between the interfacing and the fabric, but between the 2 fabric faces. I'll start working that big long piece inside out. You think it's going to be impossible, but it's not. Just push with your fingers. If it gets tight, you can pull a little bit out this way. Go back and push more with your fingers in this way. So this is just going to take a few minutes of working this long strap right side out. Okay, so we've almost got it pulled right side out. Just reaching in down there with my fingers and pulling it out a few inches at a time until it's, and there we go, we're at the end. And what did I do? I forgot to clip my corners. So I got a puffy corner there. Just what I told y'all last time not to do. Did not clip my corners. So I've got a thick wadded up corner there. Alright, so now I'm going to go down on this end, the unsealed end, and sort of fold it in and sew it closed, just like we did the opening on the main body of the pattern. Sewed it closed. Now this also needs to be top stitched because there is interfacing in there, which is making it stiff. So it needs to be top stitched. So once again, like before, I'm just putting the edge of the fabric to the edge of my foot and just running a top stitch, making sure that my seams are mashed out neat and flat before I sew over them, or it can twist really easy. You can iron it before you start so that you don't gotta fight it. If you're worried it'll wad up or it's gonna turn sideways, just iron it. And then you can have your edges already nice and flat. You don't gotta work them down as you sew. So there we go. I've got my strap made. I'm going to lay this aside. And we're going to make a homemade tassel for, so I'm using a contrasting fabric, whereas on this one I made it with the material that was used on the outside. So depending on, but since this is a loud fabric, I think something that, so I just took like a rectangular piece of fabric like this, about 6 inches long, and that's probably about 4 inches wide, 3 or 4 inches wide, and I'm folding it in half, and then I'm just making little cuts in it, but I'm not going all the way to the edge. I'm leaving about 1 inch of folded fabric at the edge. Alright, so I open it up, and that's what we've got. It's going to turn it over, and I'm going to roll it. I'm going to roll it as tight as I can. It doesn't have to be super tight, but it doesn't need to be really loose either. Okay, so I've got it rolled like that. Now I'm taking these other 2 strips of fabric that I cut, also probably about 6 inches long, putting one in the middle and tying the middle. Okay, I'm tying it closed. Now this is going to be my piece. That's my 2 arms that I'm going to use to attach it to my case. Now I'm folding it in half. And using this other piece to go around it this way. And I'm tying that on. That way. And so I've got my fabric tassel. Now this is going to be the piece I'm going to use to fasten it, and so I can see my ties right here hanging down longer than the main part, so I'll just trim it off to where it all blends together. Alright, we're going to lay that aside with our strap. Alright, let's put our pattern up. Okay, now like I said, for what we're doing in class, the storage case, we would be folding it this way and putting a seam on the top and putting a snap, and that's it. It's a storage case. But we're making this pattern actually has 3 options you can make with it. One of them is a baby changing pad. If instead of putting interfacing, if I would have put batting in there, or I could still leave the interfacing and just add batting, then it would be slightly puffy, and this would, this is how they make baby changing pads to go in a diaper bag. Then you just put a snap on it, and then when someone wants to get it out of their diaper bag, they unsnap it, lay it out, lay their baby on it. I think it would be good to make it out of like a vinyl or a wipeable fabric, but it's not necessary because it would be washable. Okay, so that's option 1, and we're doing option 2, which is the storage case like this. We're making the storage case for our patterns. Now there's an option 3, and this is just optional. We will not be doing this in class. I'm just going to show you this so that you can do it at home. You can get your own fabric and use that pattern to make another one of these out of your own fabric. And then, like I said, you will need to make you a strap and a tassel. And so it's the opposite way around to make the book bag. We're actually going to sew our right sides together. And we're going to measure down. When we made the case, we measured down roughly 1.5 inches. But for this, we're going to measure down 2 inches. Actually, let's go with 2.5 inches. No, let's go with 2 inches. You'll see why later. I'm going to be taking some of it, the play up in the bottom, making a bottom. Alright, so we're going to measure 2 inches. Alright, so now we're going to fold our piece like this. And where's my pins? And just pin it to hold it together so it doesn't come undone as I'm moving it through the machine. So to make the book bag, we're pinning it good sides together, and now we're going to sew it. And I'm just going to run my stitch, just follow my old seam. It gives me a good guide. It's a good point. Keeping the edges together as much as possible. And the other side. When you're sewing through something thick like this, you need to have your larger needle in, because if you have your thin needle, like for sewing delicates, it will break it, and you need to go slow. What I did just right there, reversing it, made the needle shift, and that fabric was so thick I heard it, it almost broke it, but it didn't. So you want to have your thicker needle in and go slow. Don't be frustrated if your thread breaks. That's a lot of pressure and tension. It's not really made to be sewing through such thicknesses. Alright, now before we turn this right side out, we're actually gonna, how we're gonna make the bottom in our book bag is we're gonna open it up. Put my hand in there, open it up, and I'm going to mash down that corner. See how I mashed that corner down like that? I'm gonna put me a pin there just to hold it open. And then I'm going to measure. How far back you measure is how big it makes the bottom of your bag. I'm going to measure back approximately 1.5 inches, because this is kind of a small bag, and if I make it too big. Okay, so I'm going to mark my chalk on there at the end of my measuring tape at 1.5 inches. And I'm going to also do that to the other corner. Put my hand in it, open it up. Mark it at 1.5 inches. Alright, now I'm going to put it on my machine. And you want to keep that triangle as uniform as you can. It'll slide to one side or the other, but you've got that interfacing in there, so it's not going to be as bad as it would be if your fabric was loose. Okay, and I'm going to sew this. I said mine's at roughly 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. Sewing across. Once again, slow, because I'm going through several layers of fabric and interface in there. I don't want to jerk my needle, it'll break it. Okay, my other side. Putting my needle down in the fabric before I start, reversing, sort of seal off the edge there. Going slow. Reversing at the end. Alright, taking my pin out. Then I'm going to turn my bag right side out. And let's see what we've got. And there, we've got the beginnings of our book bag. And you see how that's different from our storage case. This one, we just folded it, sewed it flat. This one, we put right sides together, sewed it, and then turned it right side out. Put our little seam in the bottom to make it have a bottom. So now we're going to take our, we're going to be attaching our strap here at the side. So we're going to turn this, like I could just sew this down like that, but it wouldn't really give us the right amount of room. Now if you had a thin ribbon that you were going to use as a strap, well, obviously couldn't use ribbon because it would break, but you know, like some type of plastic strap or leather strap, something you took off a purse, that might would work because that's not going to take up much room and it would just fold over there at the corner. But we're sewing on this kind of wide one, so I'm taking this corner and I'm not folding it exactly over even. I'm coming sort of in like that. That's kind of an odd shape there. And then I'm just going to, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and let's pin it to hold it in place, and let's go ahead and, alright, let's turn our other one in. Just kind of bringing the point in and down a little bit. Sort of an odd shape. It's not a perfect scenario, but the reason we're doing this is we need this flap to come in a little bit, because once that strap is there, so we need room for it to come over like that, so it's giving us a little bit of space. Alright, so I'm going to take and just sew along the edge there. I'm actually going to start back where I can see my old seam, and the reason I'm doing that is that way when we turn it over on the top side, it'll look like one continuous seam. So I'm just sewing along the edge of the fold. Once again, slow, because that's a lot of thickness there. Take out my pin. So on this side, you can see that it's just sort of like a continual seam there. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing here. And on this, I'll just sew it on the top side, and I can see right where my... Okay. Now, this is what we've got. And see, this is going to make the flap to where it can close, have a little bit more room to close once we put the strap on. Now, I've already put the strap on this side, and as you can see, I sewed like a square shape seam when I fasten it, and that's a common way that they do straps. They actually go crisscross sometimes, but I just went in the middle and then did my square shape. Now, I'm actually going to fold this strap in half like that when I attach it. And then I put it on the front piece of fabric, attach it to the side there. And I recommend that you might want to do this by hand if you're not familiar with your machine, because you can see how many layers of fabric this is. It's going to be really thick, and my machine is really going to balk at sewing that on there. And it will very easily break a needle. And you'll watch, if you watch how I do it, I'm actually going to walk the I'm actually going to walk my needle in with my knob on the side rather than just mashing the foot pedal a lot during this. Because anytime I'm mashing the foot pedal and the needle stops and it doesn't want to go, rather than pushing it on and it'll wad or break, then I roll it with my knob. Roll my knob in. Okay, now here I can feel where the end of it is, so I'm turning it. I went across through the middle first just to attach it, and now I'm doing my square seam. And that's actually a little bit too far, because it's not, I can tell it's not going to go through right there. It's too thick. Alright, so I'm turning it and doing the bottom part. Once again, very slow. Trying to pay attention to the tension on my needle. I'm rolling the knob with my hand right here because it's too thick. The machine's not doing it. It would break. If you feel pressure against your needle, don't force it. It will snap on you. It's not really made to sewing machine's not really made to go through that many thicknesses of fabric. You might just want to do it by hand. Alright, see it's a little bit thinner right here. My machine may do it. I'll see it's not going to go in. I'm pushing, rolling it in with the knob. Rolling it in with the knob. There it goes. Okay, so we've got both of our straps sewed on now. And I just did one of them backwards. Okay. And so that's what our purse, our book bag, tote, whatever you'd want to do with it, that's what it looks like. Okay, and I could put a snap right here, or a piece of Velcro, but I'm just going to put a tassel, and the weight of my tassel will hold it down good enough for me. So to put that tassel on, once again, all you've got to do is just, see these are the two pieces that we tied it up with, left to attach it. I can just sew through that by hand, but since I'm always doing things the quick way, this will leave a little place on the front, but I'm just going to sew a stitch across, reverse, again, just make it 2 or 3 times across to where it's strong enough to, and then just cut off the excess like that. Of course, it needs to be cleaned up with all the strings and everything, but that's what you've got. You've got you a book bag. And some people, let me get this bottom pulled out, some people will actually cut a piece of cardboard from a cereal box and lay it in the bottom there to keep it still.